everybody, it's Jeanette Purkis here. Welcome to Whimsy Manor, albeit by digital means. A while back, somebody told me a pretty unhelpful microaggression, which said, oh, but we're all on the spectrum somewhere. And I put that on Facebook, and I put some examples of what I said in response to that person. And lots of people were quite interested and said, oh, we'd really like to know about what you said to them and all of that. So I thought, well, rather than telling individuals, I'll hopefully reach a wider group of people, and it'll be more useful doing a few little videos. So I've actually got 3 videos lined up, just so they're not too long, where I go through a microaggression and ways of responding to it. So the first one is exactly that one. I think we're all on the spectrum somewhere, aren't we, Jeanette? Now, that's an interesting one because it is usually not meant in hostility. That one is usually meant in an understanding that the person is being supportive. They're actually not. The main issue with that one is it's really dismissive. It's basically saying your experience is irrelevant because we're all the same. The other thing about that is it has a really poor understanding of what's meant by a spectrum in medicine. So a spectrum is not a continuum. It's not a line where the most autistic person's there and the least autistic person's there. That doesn't work. And if you look through medicine, there are other spectrums. So there's the schizophrenia spectrum, there's the fetal alcohol spectrum, and the autism spectrum. What it means is an umbrella term under which sit a number of conditions. That's exactly what a spectrum is. It's not a long line. And the other one on that, which I always say, is, well, if we're all on the spectrum somewhere, why is there a diagnosis of autism? Another one which really frustrates me, and I suspect a lot of other people, is, oh, but you must be really high functioning. Functioning labels are a difficult, fraught thing. The problem with functioning labels, one of the problems is they're not actually a medical diagnosis. They're a shorthand, and they're an unhelpful shorthand. The issue with functioning labels is that I'm an autistic person. I can have some of the stereotypically high-functioning behaviours and experiences, as well as some of the stereotypically low-functioning behaviours and experiences at exactly the same time. So that means I am probably, binding to my own experience, a lot of other autistic people are not one or the other. The other thing is, and we need to remember that the functioning labels aren't actually anything. They're not a medical thing. They're not part of autism. They're an add-on. One of the issues with them is that if you have somebody and you say they're high functioning, they'll often really struggle to get assistance. And if they're in school, they will get less support because they're intelligent, they're articulate, they don't seem to be having issues. That's not right, and it's really unhelpful. On the other end of things, the people who are believed to be low functioning have another stereotype applied, and that is that they shouldn't even try. You know, they're low functioning, so they always will be, so this is their potential, they've reached it, fine. People need to be encouraged to reach their potential, whatever that may be, and I think those stereotypical sort of views are really unhelpful. Another thing that I do, I can't speak for anyone else, when I'm in public, I'm very different from when I'm at home. I do mask. I don't sort of intentionally mask, but it's almost like a natural thing now after 43 years of trying to be not considered too weird by the neurotypical folks. And so when you're seeing me outside of my own home and outside of my own context, I'm very different. I'm doing the mask, so I probably look a lot more high functioning, whatever that is, than if I'm not. And I always want to say to these people, and usually I'm too nice to say it, but I always want to say to them, wow, when did you become my doctor and know so much about my autism? I didn't realise. How much do you charge? Really unhelpful thinking. The other one, which is a bit frustrating, I think, for all of us, and it's quite easy to dispel, but it's annoying, is, oh, but you don't look autistic. Excuse me, what does autistic look like? Can someone define that to me? I know hundreds of autistic people. We don't have one look. We have as many looks as there are autistic people. It's very silly and it's very superficial and it's based in really unhelpful stereotypes. Another thing, once again, I'm tempted to say to these people, gee, how did you have such a nuanced understanding of autism that you know what we all look like? That's amazing. Can I learn that? You know, it's really unhelpful stuff. This is the worst experience of a microaggression that I remember. And I'll give the situation. I was at the book launch for my second book, The Wonderful World of Work. And so at the National Library in Canberra, absolutely beautiful, lots of friends, nice time. This woman who I peripherally knew came up to me, bought a book, I signed it, I gave it to her, and she said, Jeanette, you know what? You don't have to say you're autistic. You could pass for normal. I just had to sit there and not yell at her. I took her to task because that's incredibly insulting. It comes from a view that autism, being autistic, is worse than being neurotypical. And so the thing we all aspire to is normality. And neurotypically, I can't say it, being neurotypical. It was really unhelpful and really insulting. And I think every autistic person who's ever had that said to them has considered that a big insult. What is the normal? What's this normal thing anyway? I mean, you go around talking about normal when it applies to people is incredibly unhelpful. So I need to be really careful with stuff like normal. And if people say you can pass for normal, I mean, for me, my autistic identity is hard won over 43 years of struggle and trying to define myself in a world that didn't accept me. For someone to crap all over that and say I could pass for normal is not cool. And this one is more for parents, and it's one where an autistic child is behaving in a way that's not the expected. And usually an older person, often an older person with no children, will say, your child just needs more discipline. They're naughty. Oh dear. So you can't actually discipline an autistic child's experiences away. Someone behaves in response to stimulus and what's going on. If somebody's overloaded with sensory stuff, disciplining them is not going to help, whereas taking away the sensory issue will be much more useful. The idea that it's naughtiness, there's a really old-fashioned sort of view of children, but you still get that, and it's often people judging, it's often people not realising, not understanding the situation and just chucking in a whack of good judgment there or poor judgment there, and making children and parents feel bad in the process. Given discipline usually means punishment in that, like sanctions, rather than actually teaching self-discipline, which is a useful skill. It's really unhelpful, and it's not going to help the kid. And generally, autistic children are not being naughty. That's just a really, in fact, very few children are being naughty. That's an old-fashioned and sort of notion which probably needs retiring, largely. And the similar one, probably the same person who said the last one will say this one. They didn't used to have all these diagnoses when I was younger. Yeah, actually they did. They didn't have the diagnoses, but they had the things. So I'm an autistic person who didn't get diagnosed until I was 20. I went right through high school, primary school, all of that, first years of university with no diagnosis. And it was hell. I was bullied, I was miserable, I thought I was the only person in the world who experienced things like me. There was autism at that time before the diagnosis existed. I can vouch for that because it was me. That was my experience, and I know it's the experience of a lot of other autistic people. So it's really unhelpful to go on about, oh, these things are new. Well, yes, the labels, the diagnoses probably are quite new, but in terms of the experiences of people who are neurodivergent, I suspect that's as old as time. A diagnosis is a good thing. It's actually a means to access supports. It's not a negative. You don't want to avoid it. If you can use a diagnosis, go get one. Your child can use a diagnosis, go get one. And the last one I'm going to do, it's funny because it looks a bit wacky and silly when I'm looking at it, but it's actually very serious. And I know that the example I've used is, I know someone whose autistic child was cured by drinking camel milk. Now, I did go to an event with a camel milk salesperson. It was $35 a litre, and it was obviously being sold to desperate parents who wanted answers and support. And the selling person was making a lot of money of it. This is the charlatan thing, the snake oil salesperson. Wherever you have people that want answers, that want solutions to what's going on in their life, there will be people willing to make a buck off them. And some of these therapies, dare I say it, are just unhelpful and stupid, like camel milk. It's not really going to hurt kids, but some of them are actually dangerous to children. Some of them are not so much in Australia. We don't have so much of this, but there's some really awful therapies, autism cures. Also, there isn't a cure for autism, and in my mind, I'm not sure we need one. I think that when we've focusing on curing and fixing and everything. We're not focusing on getting that young person to have the skills they need to navigate the world. And also, I don't want to be fixed. Thank you very much. For me, autism is an integral part of who I am. So avoid the charlatans, avoid the snake oil salespeople, because not only are they ripping you off, it can be hurting your child, and it doesn't work. So that's all I'm going to do now. It went a bit longer than I expected. I've got a few more microaggressions, so I might just post them every week. But have a lovely, whatever time of day it is, in whatever place in the world you are. Mr. Kitty would have helped. She's asleep on the bed. I hope there's some useful stuff in there around microaggressions, so thank you.